Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is Tracey Gee. Tracey is a certified leadership coach and consultant dedicated to guiding individuals toward transformative self-awareness and meaningful personal and professional growth. Her diverse clientele includes Coca-Cola, Amazon, and the NBA's Miami Heat. We're going to talk this morning about her book, The Magic of Knowing What You Want, a practical guide to unearthing the wisdom of your desires. Tracey, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Brock.
You refer to purpose and desire as siblings, which I thought was very interesting. And you make the related point that purpose is well respected, but desires not so much.
Mm-hmm.
What lies at the heart of this instant suspicion at the very concept of desires?
I think it comes from a good place. It comes from a good intention of we don't want people to be selfish. We don't want people to ignore the needs of everybody around them. Excuse me. And I think that is well-intentioned, but it goes a little bit far if there's not enough nuance to it. So I like to tell people what you want, what your desires are. It's a big window into your purpose. It sheds so much light onto it, but we often try to close it up because we think, oh no, this can go bad or this can harm other people. And again, I want to say, yes, when you look at the world, that is true, but there's a whole other side to it. And how we've been made in the image of God, I think is meant to help us draw out our desires as a way to listen to what our purpose might be.
And obviously, some of our desires are not so great, but that doesn't mean all of them are bad. You know, the desire to be a good father,
Mhm.
those sorts of things are very good. So we have to parse them out. And I think you make that
Absolutely.
point very well in the book.
Mhm.
In your coaching, you've noticed that a surprisingly large number of us actually don't know what we want or even know how to figure it out. You've come to call it desire fog. What causes desire fog?
I think it is some of these messages that we get from other people or from ourselves that desires are wrong, they're selfish, they're bad. I talk to so many people who have that conditioning in them. And so it's really hard then to even ask the question.
Hmm.
And then, even if you are asking the question, I think there's a lot of things that we do that sort of shoot ourselves in the foot. Like we don't pay attention, we don't know how to pay attention to the things that really light us up, our own sense of aliveness or not. We sort of minimize our desires. One big mistake I see people making is they assume they have to know exactly perfectly what they want before they can take a step. And I'm
Mm.
always telling people, no, 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 let's reverse that. Let's help you take some steps so that you can find clarity. And so I think that there's just these mistakes that we lean towards and make. And over time, when those become habitual, then it's really hard to figure that out. And I talk to so many people who are like, I don't know what I want. I don't even know how to figure that out. I haven't even asked myself that question in years. So how would I even begin?
Hmm. And to find a path through the questions, we need to learn to ask better questions. You talk about the distinction between primary questions and secondary questions. Break that down a bit.
Primary questions, I would say, are these deeper questions about who we are, what we want, what our purpose is. So these are questions like, what makes you come alive? What doesn't? What's really on your heart in terms of your desires? What might that look like in your life? But I see secondary questions as practical questions, like pragmatic things, questions about our competency. Like, could I really pull that off? Like,
Mm.
even if I know what I want, I probably don't have what it takes to make it happen. Or the pragmatic question, end is, I don't know if that's realistic. That could probably never really become reality. And so there's all these things that we ask about that end up shutting down what we really want because we're
Mm.
kind of infusing all this, we're sort of infusing all this stuff that tamps it down and ends up, when you do that to yourself, then you're left with okay, well then what's the point? There's no point in thinking about this. This will never happen. I'm not capable, what have you.
Yeah, a
And you
lot of
just sort
self
of,
doubt, lot of self doubt in that. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, let's dig into your four-stage pathway. I don't know if we'll get all the way through here, but you call it the authentic alignment pathway. Stage one is calibration. What happens at the calibration stage?
Calibration is really trying to attune to your sense of aliveness. So my conviction is that we all have an inner compass that is guiding us towards our purpose, towards how we're supposed to live that out in the world. But the problem is we sort of get distance from it. So calibration is really trying to pay attention to who are we? How are we uniquely made in the image of God?
Mm-hmm.
How do we reflect God in the way that we do? And what makes us come alive and what does not? So it's that attention to the inner compass that I think we all have in us.
In stage 2, expansion, we put our attention toward intentionally cultivating our ideas with openness about what's possible, as you were referencing a moment ago. How do we go about sparking an imagination for what the possibilities are?
So I always recommend an exercise in the book. I like to be very practical with these things because I heard so much teaching on themes like this in the past, but I never knew how to do it. So I'm trying to offer people practical ways to do that. So one really quick exercise people can do is write down everything you can think of that you want. So in the book, I
Mm-hmm.
talk about doing 100, like write down 100 desires and don't edit yourself. And people don't get stressed out by the 100, but it's just meant to sort of give you more spaciousness to think about this rather than limitation. Or if that feels overwhelming, just set a 3-minute timer and write down everything you can think of that you really
Mm-hmm.
want. And just the purpose is just to be honest. It's not, can this really happen or plan or put, logistics on it, but it's just what's there. Another author I really love, Emily P. Freeman, she talks about how you want what you want. So you might as well be honest about it. You might as well actually admit that and take a look at it and see what's there.
Mm. In stage 3 experimentation, you see people, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, make the same mistake over and over. And that mistake, as you mentioned, is assuming that they have to know exactly what they want before moving forward. Why? Drill down into that a bit. Like, why is that a mistake?
I think that's a mistake because I always talk about how there are thinking questions and there are doing questions.
Hmm.
There's questions that you come to clarity by thinking things through, by reflection, by prayer. And then there's other things that you come to yourself and an understanding of yourself that only comes through doing,
Mm-hmm.
through taking action, through seeing yourself in that context. So for example, if I'm looking for my next pair of jeans, you're not going to do that by just looking. You have to try it on. And same with our lives. You got to try some things on. You got to take some steps. The trick is to make those steps not feel overwhelming. So to make them doable and realistic and bite-size, but to see them as experiments for what you want. It's that try on. It's like getting in the dressing room and saying is this really me or is this not me? If somebody's trying to decide, do I want to go in this path in my career or this one? There you could sit and think through that for a long time and think through a lot of different reasons, pros and cons,
Mm-hmm.
make these lists. But ultimately, I think what actually brings the best clarity is through an action step. So go talk to someone, go have a conversation, go do something that helps you see, is this the right thing for me or is it not?
Hmm. In the interest of time, we'll have to skip over stage 4, which is integration, by the way. But I want to close by circling back to where we started. You speak in the final chapter about purpose converging with desire. And that's an exciting thought, a divine alignment. Our desires and God's will, to put it in Christian parlance, kind of coming into more of an alignment. What does it look like and what does it feel like internally when our desires and our purpose synchronize and come into alignment in that way?
Well, I think it was Buechner who said, the way to find your purpose is to see where your deep gladness meets the world's hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that often. And I think that is what happens when you find the things that light you up, that you truly desire, that come from this deep place within you. And then you see how that's good for the people you love, for the communities you care about, and for other people. And you see God's will and purpose interwoven in that. I think it is the reason why I use the word alignment is because it's a convergence. It's bringing those things together and to
Mm-hmm.
see, oh, those don't have to be separate things. Those actually live together and support one another. And it's really beautiful.
Hmm. The magic of knowing what you want, a practical guide to unearthing the wisdom of your desires. Tracey Gee, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really thoughtful stuff. Thanks so much, Tracy.
Thank you for having me.